Good morning. It is February 16th. I want to welcome you to the committee hearing this morning. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Marquise Harris Dawson. We have a quorum. Mr. Clerk, what do we have going today?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. We have 7 items on the agenda. We have 5 CLA reports and resolutions, and city clerk item, and a motion.
Well, why don't we go through the 5 motions? Why don't you read them, and we'll move forward from there.
Certainly. Item number 1 is a CLA report and resolution relative to the city's federal legislative program support for Senate Bill 2157, and which is the Safe Drone Act of 2015. Item number 2 is a CLA report and resolution relative to inclusion in the city's federal legislative program support for H.R. 3068 and Senate Bill 1766, the Restore Honor to Service Members Act. Item number 3 is a CLA report and resolution relative to including the city's legislative program support for H.R. 405, the Local Hire Act. Item number 4 is a CLA report and resolution relative to including in the city's state legislative program support for Assembly Bill 1584. And item number 5 is a CLA report and resolution relative to including in the city's federal legislative program support for Senate Bill 2112. Those are the 5 items, sir. Okay,
And we have no cards?
We have no cards.
Okay, so unless my colleague wants to make a statement on where it relates to the first 5, why don't we adopt the CLA report and resolution on all 5 of those items? And so without objection, those items will be deemed approved. If we could move on to item 6.
Item number 6 are city clerk reports relative to proposed amendments to the Los Angeles City Election Code.
Okay, why don't we get the city clerk to come forward on this item? Good morning to you. So why don't you just kind of walk us through, if you would, what's going on?
Sure. You should have before you actually 2 reports. We were initially going to submit what we called Phase 1 in November, but due to the holidays and the recesses, we are submitting both reports. This current one is what we would have submitted the spring anyway. I'm sorry, Jenny Pack, Office of the City Clerk. And
we all know who you are.
Yeah. So it's our usual updating of our code, but what we're including this time around is the recent legislation. There's a couple of them, and we're also incorporating the charter amendments that passed last year for the new election dates come 2020, and the 2 term extensions that we're including in our code. The 2 legislation that I mentioned, one is to allow permanent residents to become poll workers. We're following state code on that. The second item is to allow vote-by-mail voters who returned their vote-by-mail envelopes on time but perhaps didn't sign the back of the envelope, but we received the envelope by election day. We're allowing them to either sign a form or submit some document with their signature by 8 days after election day to include those in our count. So those are the 2 items of interest.
Do you have any questions on this, Mr. Harris Dawson? Okay, neither do I. I appreciate the work. So without objection, we'll adopt the city clerk report. And that brings us to 7.
Item number 7 is motion Rue Wesson relative to an instruction to the CLA with the assistance of the city attorney to report with recommendations for a standardized transition plan for city council offices. And Mr. Chair, we also have a letter from Councilmember Rue that's just been submitted for distribution.
Is it a long letter?
No, it's one page.
Okay, why don't you, no, you know what, we can just submit it into the record. But do we have anybody here so that we can have a conversation about this? Yvonne? Do we have somebody come up? Let's kind of take a swipe at this. In fact, you know what, this is so short, I'll let you read this. Mr. Clerk, I'll let you read this into the record.
The letter from Councilmember Rue states as follows. Honorable council members of the Rules, Intergovernmental Relations and Neighborhoods Committee, thank you for hearing my motion today, asking the CLA, City Clerk, and City Attorney's offices to report back to the City Council on recommendations for a standardized transition plan for City Council offices. As has been widely reported, my office started with no documentation or paperwork related to open land use cases, constituent inquiries, or information on outstanding commitments of discretionary funds. Background material could have been useful for service delivery to our constituents, but more importantly, could provide information necessary for important issues facing the district and the city. No standard protocol exists for transitioning council offices, and in the absence of transition rules, departing officials may leave nothing behind. Council districts deserve a seamless transition between elected leaders so that current cases and projects are not delayed when offices turn over. There are state guidelines that may provide discretion and examples at other cities of ways to establish standardized office transitions. At the end of the day, there is always a balance to be met between document retention guidelines and burdensome red tape around filing and archiving. However, at a minimum, I believe guidelines need to be put in place for council offices to retain and transition documents pertaining to open active land use projects, open constituent cases, and open discretionary fund commitments. I believe these safeguards would ensure continuity between offices that would improve constituent outcomes during the natural flux between an incoming and outgoing administration. Thank you again for hearing this item, and I look forward to seeing the recommendations from the CLA, City Clerk, and City Attorney's offices. Sincerely, David E. Rue, Council Member.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clerk. We just lost the city clerk. It would be good if somebody can retrieve her, but we'll take advantage of Voc's years of experience. You know, to me, it makes sense that we have a conversation about some transition protocols. And, you know, you have success stories about easy transitions. We don't hear a lot of issues, but if there was some kind of general approach, then we probably would eliminate or could eliminate concerns. So how do you think AVOC 1 proceeds where it relates to the motion?
Mr. Chair, we do have transition plans. Perhaps it's an issue of making sure that everyone is aware of it, what the process is, but I know that when in closing out a council office, the CLA discusses the closeout with the council office. The Department of General Services has a meeting with them, as well as the Information Technology Agency. So each of these three entities discuss closure and the process involved. However, it's not necessarily written down or publicized, so perhaps that's where the misunderstanding or confusion arises. There's also the issue of the working papers of the council office are perhaps just that, working papers. All the official documents with land use and many of the other issues, those are already on the internet. They're in the planning department. They have case numbers and so forth. So,
But you know what, and like I said, I don't hear a lot of concerns or complaints. I have heard some, and I think part of that would be alleviated if there was an actual document that one could follow that walks through the various steps and, things that, we want to have prepared so that the next group that comes in can hit the ground running. And so would it be would it be the CLA's office that is going to try to put together this document, or will it be a working group that's created with the clerk and you, possibly the CLA? I don't know, because the one thing I do know is that I don't want to have this conversation again. And the best way to ensure that that does not occur is to have a process that everybody is comfortable with, and one that everybody understands, not just the transitioning council office, but the administrative staff that's in place to make sure these things these things occur. So what's the best way to proceed?
Since the official record keeper is the city clerk, and they are familiar with laws regarding archiving and destruction of records, perhaps it would be an informal working group headed by the city clerk with the participation of any other entities that you may wish, including, of course, the CLA and possibly the city attorney. And perhaps that could result in some kind of a formal or written process so that we can avoid this kind of conversation in the future.
Well, before I turn it over to Mr. Harris Dawson, who I'm sure has his, would like to voice his opinion, I'd like to get a report back to this committee that details the approach that we're going to take. I'd like to do it in a timely fashion. And, we don't have to do it next week. We're just now entering our next election cycle, so to speak. But this is something that I wouldn't want it to be overburdensome, but something that is very common sense, something that everyone would understand and everybody knows. So with that said, or should I have let you at least take a sip of tea? That happens to me all the time. I'm somewhere and they call on me as I had a coffee up to my lips. But anyway, why don't I defer to you for a while?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and I want to publicly thank Councilmember Rue for putting this motion forward. I think we get so busy trying to keep up with the work of the council office that, I kind of bypassed this issue, but it was one of great concern in my transition. And I think the thing I would put forward is a document would make it clear to the incoming office and to constituents what their expectations should be around what records are available and which ones are not or are optional. So, you know, people call our office and they say, well, I've had a case that opened in 2014. We find a box that says 2014 cases on it, and it's full of shredded documents. So, you know, we don't know whether to tell that person, well, we're supposed to have it and we just can't find it, or no, there's no responsibility for the person to give it to us. We just don't know, and so we're making up things. And then one of the more shocking experiences that I had was the case of events happening, city-funded events happening that were initiated by the outgoing council member after the date I was sworn in. And so without, again... You mean after you were elected? No, after I was sworn in. Oh, there were plenty of things after I was elected. But I mean, you know, July 4th and 5th and so on and so on. And so it was impossible to get any records of this, how it happened, how much it was costing, what account it was coming out of, or anything like that. And so, again, if it's the case that we shouldn't have any expectation that council events after we're sworn in or within 30 days should have our imprint on it, that's fine. That should just be known to everyone, right? So people aren't asking me about, well, why are you doing 2 jazz shows at the same time you're doing this other fireworks show? Or we can tell a constituent, the outgoing council member only has to give us records for the last 12 months. So if it was before that, we don't have it, or it's unlikely we have it. I think creating expectations across the board is certainly what my experience suggests that is needed.
Yeah, and I think what we want to do is make it crystal clear that we're serious about this, because we don't want heartburn in the future. So we want the departments that have been instructed to put this together to recognize that this is something that we're really focused on. And now, do we have some kind of was there a report, a preliminary report on this by the city clerk? Or so basically we're starting anew here. So why don't we, at this point, I'll ask your office, Avak, to take the lead in putting together a working group. And it doesn't have to be informal or formal. I mean, we don't have to vote on it, but let's put that group in place. And I'd like a preliminary update by within 30 days or the next meeting, just to let me know the progress that's been made, who's part of this working group, what are the thoughts of the working group, what types of things do they want to work on, and in what order. It seems to me, just in hearing 2 minutes from Mr. Harris Dawson, that there are a variety of angles in which we can go about putting this together. So if you have no more questions, and then we have no cards.
No, sir, we have no cards.
I'd like to say that that's will be the order. So we'll. So if we could just instruct you to do that, and then we will adopt. I guess it's the rule motion. So without objection, that will be the order. Mr. Clerk, what's before the body?
Mr. Chair, that clears the desk.
Do you want to say anything, or sing, or dance, or should I just adjourn? I'm following your guidance on this. Oh, the city attorney. No, let's take Dion's advice here. Yes, sir.
Dancing's not on the agenda,
It's.
and I think we should all be thankful for that.
Yeah. I don't know. It looks like there's about 4 of us here that could cut a rug. I don't know about you. But with that said, this committee hearing is adjourned.